Good evening. My name is Stephen Woolfolk. I'm the Assistant Director of Public Affairs here at the Kansas City Public Library. And I appreciate those of you who came out here and braved the pending storms to be with us this evening. It's an honor for me to be here tonight, not only because S is one of my favorite books published in the last year, but because it provides me an opportunity to introduce one of my closest friends here at the library, our Director of Reader Services, Katie Stover. What does a Director of Reader Services do? Honestly, I don't know. Mostly they do a bunch of librarian things that a lowly newspaper refugee such as myself could never hope to understand. But if Katie is any indication, they also exhibit an almost otherworldly gift for making book recommendations. I was actually first introduced to S because Katie recommended that my wife, who she's never met by the way, might enjoy it. I bought it for her for Christmas, and Katie, as usual, was right. She loved it. So if you'll indulge me, I would like to play a little game tonight following the program. We'll call it Stump the Librarian. Katie, you brought your laptop, right, or a tablet or something?
I did.
Good. So after the program, Doug is going to be right out here signing copies of S. And I should mention that the book is available for sale from Barnes & Noble. And I would encourage you to pick it up. This can be a very difficult book to find. If you go to a local bookstore, you may or may not find it on the shelf. You can order it through Amazon, but I looked, and as of this morning, it was the exact same price that we're selling it for tonight, and there was a 2 to 3 week wait before it even shipped. So pick it up tonight. If you like it, pick it up for yourself, pick it up for somebody else. You won't regret it. It's a fantastic book. Anyway, while Doug is signing copies of his book, I would like for as many of you as possible to seek out Katie, give her the title of the last book that you enjoyed, and she'll tell you what you should read next. And the next time you're at one of our library events and you see either Katie or myself, I would like for you to find us, track us down, and tell us what you thought of her recommendation. I think you will like it. Okay, let's get this show on the road. Please welcome my good friend and soon to be your personal book recommendation maven, Katie Stover.
Thanks, Steve. That's great. Good evening, everyone, and I can't tell you how thrilled I am that I was able to bring Doug Dorst, the author of my favorite book from last year, to the library. I think I started talking about this book in November, a couple of days after it was published, and at the end of the year, all the TV stations and the radio stations call up the library and they want us to talk about, well, what are your 10 best and all that. So every time I went on the TV station or the radio station, I brought S with me. And that's not something you're supposed to do in the media. They don't like it when you repeat yourself on show to show to show. You kind of hear about it. But I'm not certain anybody's paying attention when I'm on TV because I kept talking about it and I just kept hearing about new people who were excited to read S, as excited about it as I was. So I didn't get dinged for that, so maybe I'll try it again in December when I find something else. But in the meantime, I'm going to introduce Doug Dorst. He's going to talk about S, the novel that he wrote in collaboration with J.J. Abrams. This is not Doug's first novel. This is his first novel, Alive in Necropolis. And I found a copy of this on my shelf, Doug, because it was submitted for an award that I was serving on a committee for, and I was so thrilled to find this on my bookshelf and bring it in for you to see. I have a copy of Alive in Necropolis by Doug Dorst. We have some other things that I will be talking about as we go through the evening, but right now I'd like to welcome Doug Dorst to our chairs, and we'll go through some of this. We'll have a little chat. You will have a chat with us, and then we will retire for Doug to sign your copies of S. So, Doug?
Hey, Katie.
And I also want to let you know that Doug just finished your MFA?
No.
Ended it?
No, I finished, I just got tenure is the big news.
That is awesome.
Thank you.
So I know you had a very busy year with getting ready to going up for tenure and then all the publicity coming out around this book, and I can't imagine what the year leading up to this year was like writing S. Can you tell me a little bit, how long did it take you to write this book?
I first got hooked up with JJ in, I think, the winter of '09. That's when I first got the call asking if I might be interested in doing the project. And then we spent the better part of a year just talking about characters, about how the book might work, and putting together a sample. So we did, I did the foreword in chapter 1, both the main book and the margin notes. We put together a pitch document, and we took that out to publishers in April of '11. And then from there on, it was just a sprint, and the vast majority of it got done in about 2 years.
That's not a lot of time for a book that looks like this, that I have a rubber band around to keep all this stuff in. I'm sure a lot of you do as well. We check it out with a rubber band here at the library.
Oh, I was wondering. Because that's been an issue of how to circulate it.
Yes, it has been. I've been pretty vocal about that with my librarian friends, which is it needs to be on the shelf in every library. That it's our responsibility to put books like this on the shelf for our readers who like books, who enjoy a reading experience. So I have been hearing from some of my librarian friends, well, how do you catalog it? What do you do with all the loose pages? I said, keep it circulated in the box, put a rubber band around it, and let it go out, because it's our job to make sure that books like this get into the hands of our readers who enjoy a print reading experience. So there you go. There's my soapbox. I am done. Can we go through some of these fascinating slides that you brought with you?
Sure, absolutely.
There's a little clicker, and
Okay. I have no idea how to use it.
I learned this one. Yeah, it's this end.
Okay. Okay, let's try it.
Yes.
There we go. So I thought I would include a few shots of pages at different stages of the process, because it was a process that was a bit different from simply just writing a book. Having a manuscript that exists in a Word document or whatever, which you then submit to a copy editor, and it all just ends up in a book. This was my first attempt at the very first page of the book, and this is a page in which the two people who are reading the book and who are going to be putting all of their filling the margins with their notes to each other, this is where they meet. And you may or may not be able to tell, I imagined it as a series of sticky notes that they had left for each other. And that's not how it ended up in the book. In the book, it's just a back and forth on the title page. But it's a good example of how the whole process worked, which was, I thought, okay, sticky notes. And I didn't really worry about whether that would be feasible or even a good idea. I just had the idea, went with it, and I figured when the manuscript's all locked down, when we start talking about production, then it'll be clear what we can and can't do. So.
Very cool. And it turned out to be this wonderful marginalia in multiple colored inks and different handwriting styles. It's so distinct.
And that was a development as we went along. As I was writing, it became clear as the margin notes were piling up and getting more and more complex that we needed some kind of organizational system for them. And the color coding seemed like a good idea. Each pair of colors represents a particular section of the relationship between the two of them. Which is to say, if you can imagine, each of them is using, one's using a blue pen and one's using a black pen for the first stage of the relationship. Then they switch over to green and orange. It's a little bit of an artificiality, but it seemed like it was defensible. The artificiality wasn't too intrusive, and it seemed like it was important to anchor the reader, at least in some ways, because a lot is being asked of the reader in many other ways.
I like that this book does ask you to be an active participant. Were you thinking of that when you were writing it? The reader is almost another character in this book.
I was aware from the beginning that we were going to be making a book that would be in some ways a demanding reading experience. I wasn't too worried about it as I was writing, because I really was given by JJ, and frankly I also just took it too, carte blanche to just follow the story where it went, in as tangled a way as it seemed to want to go, with the idea that okay, we'll sort it all out later. Let's just get it all out there.
Did you intend for the reader to be as active a participant in this reading experience as they are?
I think so. I mean, it's probably a pretentious literature professor thing to say, but that's probably true of every book. Every reader is going to have a particular idiosyncratic or possibly just unique experience with a text. This one is, it's probably going to be more unique because I mean, each reader actually has to figure out how to read it. Do you read the source novel first on its own, get to the margin notes? Do you read everything simultaneously? And I think there's a different experience to be had with not just with each approach, but probably with each reader's experience of how just how they happen to engage the material.
Now, I know you wrote it, so I know how you read it. But how did someone like JJ read it when he got the finished product? Did he
I've
ever tell
never
you that?
asked him.
Okay.
I should.
I did a little research, and some of the commentary I'm seeing has folks suggesting that you read Ship of Theseus first, and then go back and read the marginalia, and then go back and read the ephemera. And the one or two folks I've run into who read all of it at once are telling me that it's taking far longer to read this book, but that's because you're making yourself work on so many different levels with this book. And for me, that was the way I wanted to read it. Read the
All
text.
simultaneously?
Yes, and that's why I have one chapter left. But read the marginalia. Just read each word as I see it, like what's happening on this page. Read everything on that page. Then read the text. Read the marginalia as it shows up. So I'll interrupt my reading. Oh, there's the footnote. Jump down to the footnote. Oh, here's an insert they're referencing, and so there will be a page where sometimes I'm reading text, marginalia, footnote, ephemera. I'll go back to more text, more marginalia. And but for me, I wanted all of it of a piece. I wanted to experience all of it. So what I was telling some readers is the introduction is how you learn. You teach yourself how you want to read this book. And that was how I was introducing folks. It was like, go through it. Take 2 hours to read the introduction. But you'll get acclimated to the style.
Yeah, and a lot of people have asked, how do I read it? And I think figuring out how you're best going to read it, how you're best going to absorb and retain and emotionally interact with the material, that's the best way for you. I have no interest in saying, like, there is this prescribed way to do it, because it might be entirely at odds with how you read. So it was designed such that it did not need to be read in one particular way. And I think JJ and I both, we both thought that, part of the fun is figuring it out for yourself, figuring out how best to approach the material. I have incredible respect for you for even attempting everything simultaneously. I would say that I would love to say that my brain is limber enough to be able to do that. It would be an outright lie.
Well, I've been at it since November, and that's why I have one chapter left. But what's on the next slide?
Let's find out.
You don't know.
Okay, so here is a sample page. Both the page on the previous slide and this one were part of the package that we sent out to publishers when we were shopping the book, and so this is an early and not actually terribly busy page, but this is when we were trying to give the publishers a sense of how the handwriting might work. In the finished version of the book, we have our two readers are represented by two really lovely styles of handwriting. This is not lovely. This is my handwriting, both readers. And one is my attempt at script, which I hadn't used since 4th grade. And then one is my sort of cramped pencil printing, which is pretty much how I roll. Anyway, it was clear from the beginning that I would not be doing the handwriting in the final version.
Who did do the handwriting?
It was two people from the design firm, and I think I'd like to imagine that they had like a casting session in-house. I don't know that that's true, but it's fun to imagine. And I've been asked about sort of gender issues in handwriting. Was Eric, our male reader, written by a man? Was Jen, our female reader, written by a woman? They're actually both women. Striking a blow for, I don't know.
Neat handwriting
gender
everywhere.
parity. Yeah, there you go.
Because that's what we're really after, neat handwriting. Legibility. What's on the next slide?
And this is, so I had gotten some questions about, well, how do you even prepare a manuscript like this? How, what do you send to the publisher? And, it was pretty tricky. I tried pretty much every piece of word processing software that I could find, and none of them were particularly well suited to what we were doing. And what I ended up going with was this here, where you can see we're using a track changes function to do the margin notes. And so there's back and forth. You may not be able to see it, but the color coding is there. There's blue print, black print, green print, orange print. There's purple and red, and formatting. The track changes function, or the comment function, is not really designed to do that. I think I'm just guessing that sort of formatting is taxing it. It would crash several times a day. I got in the habit of just hitting save, really. At one point I was convinced it was my computer, so I went out and got a new computer, which I think I was wrong, but I got a new computer. And then this is a later stage of in the process in which you can see the highlight material. Those are notes from me to the editors and designers about which handwritten notes bud off from which handwritten notes, what triggers what. So, and you'll notice that some of the pages are absolutely insane with arrows going everywhere, and writing curving around text breaks and such.
I'm thinking now about what it is like for me as a reader when I get one of those insane pages with the arrows and the multiple colors, and I'm reading all of that, and I'm making my brain jump from Straka to Eric to Jen to Caldera down at the bottom. How on earth did you keep all of that straight as a writer?
I mostly didn't. I am a fantastically disorganized person. I would have been well served by having an organizational system. I was defeated in every attempt to acquire one. So it was a lot of just, scribbled notes on pieces of paper that were subsequently lost. Keeping stuff in my head when I had to, if I was on page 300 and writing something that I knew had some kind of antecedent on page 100, I had to go back. Sometimes I couldn't find it. And it was not especially efficient. And I just one little step at a time.
Was there ever a point where this book made you crazy?
Oh, absolutely. Many. And one thing one complicating factor was that right about the time that we sold the book and the sprint was on was when my daughter was born. So that was a busy time, and I was just about to start a new teaching job. So that was a busy time. So I had kind of these three things going on, and mostly I didn't sleep. And so there was actually a good deal more craziness in the process maybe than even the book would have provoked on its own.
You think it shows up in the book anywhere?
I hope so. I know, I mean, I at some point I abandoned myself to it and said, you know what, if there's a kind of manic, unhinged energy in there, so much the better, because actually the characters are having a sort of, they're having a heightened experience. And there are some places where they get a little caught up in the Straka question, you know, who is the author of this novel? Or they're getting caught up in, you know, maybe more importantly, getting to know each other and falling for each other and dealing with risk and doubt and all of those things that we deal with when we start getting close to someone.
Interesting. What's on the next slide?
Okay, so
Ooh.
this is pretty much what a page looks like in the book itself, although this is before the sort of distressing and weathering of the pages has been added. And you can see, you know, this is a relatively busy page. It's kind of an average page. There are some that are absolutely nuts. And the designers got back to us on something. They said, no, this cannot be done. This page or this sequence of pages, it cannot be done. And we had to think about it. And there were some that we pulled back from, cut back on some of the notes. And then there were some where we thought, you know what, the characters are in fact getting a little carried away right now. They're really into what they're doing, and they're maybe not thinking about what is going to be legible or organized. So if we could articulate a reason why the characters might go a little nuts with it at a given moment, then we thought it would be okay.
Were there any artistic elements that the graphic designers actually made come to life for you, and you thought they're not going to be able to do that, and then they did it, and you were surprised?
Oh, the whole thing. I'm amazed that the book, it's the most beautiful book I've ever seen. And, you know, I had seen every component of it in various design stages, but then when I got it into my hands, you know, the mailman showed up one day, I opened the box, there's the book. I was stunned. I mean, to see it all together, I really feel fortunate that it's my words that are in there. That this is the amazingly beautiful vehicle that they get to ride. I don't know. I can't finish the metaphor. But,
It's amazing. I remember feeling such a sense of wonder and discovery opening up this book, and not just because pieces start falling out. Because as a librarian, I'm used to that when I empty a book drop. Things fall out of books. Nasty things. But what I also liked was the sense of discovery and that quality of voyeurism, reading the marginalia and feeling a little intrusive into this book. And I love how the artists were able to pull that together and how you were able to pull that together, because that's something that lovers of books like seeing marginalia. We like seeing what other people think about what we're reading. I don't think I've ever run into anyone who has gotten upset at me because there's a book with somebody else's personal margin notes in it.
Well, it's a really intimate experience, like seeing how someone else has interacted with a piece of literature that you're reading. And I think that was fundamental to the concept. The way that the whole project started was that JJ was outside the LA airport and found a book that someone had left on a bench. And inside the book, it said, well, to whoever picks this up, please read it, pass it along. And that got him thinking about how interesting it might be to communicate within the pages of something that is itself a kind of communication. And also how there is a kind of intimacy in a reader's relationship with a text. And what if two people were to share that? You know, what if the text is the thing that brings these two people together and actually allows them to develop this relationship? So it was conceived of as having a big love story component from the beginning.
And it's wonderful that as readers we get to participate in that, because we also experience that sense of intimacy. We're not just connecting with S, the character. Now we're connecting with Eric and Jen, and we're watching their romance bloom, and we're also part of that relationship. That's an amazing feeling for readers.
I mean, and it felt like, I mean, we knew from the beginning, and you know, JJ was absolutely adamant about it, that the illusion has to be complete and cannot lapse even for a moment. So, you know, does it make sense to produce a book that, you know, the physical book that a reader will have in his or her hands without JJ's name on it? I mean, you know, from a marketing standpoint, no, it makes no sense whatsoever. But the whole idea is that this is a found book. You know, you're not buying this. So the only place that JJ's name and my name appear is on the slipcase that the book goes into. So that is S. The slipcase encompasses, you know, the entire project, which is S. But the book that you hold in your hand is Ship of Theseus by V.M. Straka, who is not me and is not JJ. And the whole idea is that, yes, it's a book that was published in 1949, and Eric stole it from his high school library. And this is the very thing that they're passing back and forth, and they're leaving things for each other in the pages. And anything that gets in the way of that illusion seeming completely true was something that was just a non-starter. So, yeah, you're supposed to be able, or ideally, you can read the book and just feel like, yes, you found this in the stacks, and wow, you're getting to see how this relationship developed.
You do get that feeling with all the different artistic bits that the artists added, the library stamps.
Oh, that's one of my favorites. There's the "Keep this book clean" stamp.
I have seen that stamp on very old books, but what cracks me up about this part, Doug, is that by 2000, October of 2000, almost every library in the nation was automated.
But not Eric's high school.
Oh, good grief! That's bad. Well, what do you have on the next slide?
Okay.
I'm hoping to talk about
okay, so we're talking about the things that they would
Inserts.
leave for each other in the pages. So Eric is someone who's been studying Straka's works, and in particular this book, for quite some time. He's a PhD student who has just flamed out spectacularly in his program. His advisors probably stole his work. There was a blow up. Anyway, so Eric is deeply engaged in this scholarly pursuit, and he's trying to turn Jen onto it, and and to fill in all of the gaps, answer all the questions that she has about the mystery. So this is just one example of a piece that we put in. This is there are very, very few pieces of correspondence that even might be Straka's historically. So, and this is one. This is it's a letter to a Swedish director that whose adaptation of an earlier Straka book Straka took great issue with, and from a production standpoint, it was easy. I mean, it was a sort of mimeograph-looking or Xerox-looking typescript, but then we got to put an archive stamp on it because surely it's from a Straka archive, and with each piece of with each sort of extra textual element we decided to put in, there was the question of, okay, what form is it going to take? To what degree is it going to deepen the story, and in what ways? Where does it go? So this was just the easiest one for me to put up on a slide. But there's a map on a napkin from a coffee shop. There's a decoder wheel. There are five postcards from Brazil. There's a letter on that sort of tissue-thin airmail stationery. There's
an obituary.
There's an obituary.
A newspaper obituary and a card.
Yeah, and the obituary is in Portuguese, clipped from the newspaper of a tiny town in Brazil in 1964. Because every book needs that.
And it's weathered and yellow. It feels like it feels so brittle, like it could fall apart in
And
your
that's
hands.
the designers got that. You know, the designers.
Amazing.
I mean, everybody understood. Like, what we want to do is make the illusion complete. And if there's anything in that newspaper clipping that bumps you out of the illusion, I mean, then we need to go back and try to fix it.
Who decided which pieces of ephemera, what format they would take, and where they would fall in the story? Was that you or the artists?
We didn't. So I kept a little wish list as I was writing. Anything that I thought of that seemed like it would be cool, I just wrote down. I kept a little document. Again, not worrying about what would be practical, cost-effective, or even a good idea narratively. It was more, if I thought about it and it seemed cool, I wrote it down. I figured it would be someone else's job to tell me no. And then once we got the manuscript pretty much locked down, JJ and Lindsay Weber, who works with JJ at Bad Robot, and our editor at Mulholland, Josh Kendall, and I, we got together and tried to figure out, okay, which of these other pieces is going to add the most to the story, you know, without being completely insane. And it was actually pretty easy. Yeah, it was not. I think we covered it in about 10 minutes. I mean, we knew that we wanted. I think we figured out that a ballpark of 20 to 25 items would be, you know, would be about right, and it was pretty clear which ones would deepen the story in an interesting way, and would be doable. And then we also had some that we thought, this is great, but let's do it online. So yeah, there are a few more pieces that exist on various websites, some of which are clearly delineated as belonging to the book, and some not so much.
Are there any pieces on the ephemera wish list that you really wish they could have made work that didn't make it in?
I think I got pretty much everything that I wanted, or I should say, I'm happy with every piece that's in there. I would have loved some more like real 3D stuff, like some, I don't know. I think there are some references in the text to pieces of obsidian that are connected with the Straka mystery, and I kind of wanted big chunks of rock in there. But I mean, I realized like that's a thing that you tell yourself at 3 a.m. when you're typing, and you know they're not going to put a rock in the book. Anyway, I wanted more three-dimensional stuff, but I couldn't figure out, like, I couldn't say, come on, we can do it this way, because I had no idea.
I can't say I've ever found a piece of rock in a book when I pulled it out of the book drop, but you know, that'll happen tomorrow, I'm sure. Which pieces of the ephemera do you have a favorite piece? Do you have a piece that when you look at it, you just think, that's amazing, they nailed it. That's exactly what I wanted it to be.
I mean, I like them all. I think the decoder wheel is pretty amazing. I really had no idea how we were going to do it, or at first even how the code would work. I was like, no, there's this wheel, it's the Eotvos or Utvos, there's pronunciation issues. You know, there's this wheel and you'll use latitude and longitude, and I kind of thought, well, someone will help me figure out how to do it down the road. And the fact that it worked out is amazing to me. So I'm really happy with that.
That is an amazing piece. I like the napkin map.
Yeah.
Because we've all written things on napkins and hope that they don't fade or fall apart and then stuck them in books.
And
I know they
people
stick
love
them in
maps
books.
too. I mean, just maps in and of themselves are kind of fascinating. And I like the Brazilian obituary also.
All those pieces are just by themselves are beautiful works of art. It's amazing what the artist did. Which you mentioned just now about the formats, and that takes me to another question, another debatable point I've had with other readers and librarians. How well do you think this book would function in audio or electronic format? And were you even thinking of that while you were writing it? Were you thinking of other formats?
When we first started talking about the project and developing the project, I think JJ and I both thought that this will be a physical book. It will exist in no other form. Down the road, I think once the publisher got involved, it was pointed out to us that that wasn't really a viable model in today's marketplace. And so yes, there needs to be an electronic version of the book. How do we do it and have it be good? How do we do it and have it, and have the illusion preserved? And the tactile experience is a huge part of the book, I think, and I believe JJ thinks. But still, the electronic version, the designers did a fantastic job with it. And for people who like reading in that medium, I think there's a lot of pleasure to be had. They were able to reproduce all of the ephemera, the things tucked into the pages. I'm not exactly sure how it works. I'm kind of analog myself, but I believe when you get to the page, it sort of opens up before you. And one of the things the designers did, actually, I think it was very cool. There's a feature in it in which you can toggle off the margin notes and just have a clean read of Ship of Theseus, the Straka novel, which is kind of cool. And it made me rethink my sort of self-righteous Luddite pose. I'm like, wait a minute, there is a thing that the electronic version can do that the physical version can't. And how cool is that? The audio version of the book is they did make an audiobook, but it's just an audiobook of Ship of Theseus. I think it was going to be, probably too confusing to try to do everything, because you've got the voice of the novel, you've got the voice of the footnotes to the novel, because it's not just Straka's novel, it's his translator and editors. There's a narrative running along in those footnotes. Then you've got then you've got Jen and Eric in the margins. And I think when you're reading the book, you're flexible. You can choose to engage whichever text you want to at whichever moment. And with, in an audio production, I would imagine that you're kind of stuck, going sequentially. Mm-hmm. You hear this voice and then you hear this voice. So, in the end, I think people thought, well, wouldn't it be cool? The whole idea is that we're treating Ship of Theseus, the Straka novel, as this novel that really does exist. So let's do an audiobook version of the Straka novel. It's another way of grounding it in the world. So it's a different thing, but it's cool.
That makes a lot more sense, because if this book exists, it does exist in the publishing world, that is all they would have done with an audio. They would have just made an audio of Ship of Theseus, and the rest of it is not available.
Right. It's just what these two kids wrote to each other.
Which actually makes the physical object so much more powerful for those of us who read in print. That's thank you for giving me that to think about too. And then I was wondering, of the storylines, and there seem to be so many. I've read some reviews that say there's 3, that there's 4, there's as many as 5. But of all the storylines, Ship of Theseus, Straka and Caldera, Eric and Jen, the footnotes, the ephemera, which one of those did you find most challenging?
Oh, that's a good question. They're all challenging for different reasons. Jen and Eric were very challenging. For the simplest of reasons, which is that we need to be deeply emotionally invested in these two characters more than any other characters in the whole project. These are the people who are falling in love. These are the people that the reader is going to be ideally investing him or herself with, and so it's really important to get those voices right. It's characterization and voice, and because if that relationship doesn't work, the whole thing falls apart. It's just a gimmick. And again, that's something that's true for every book, right? The big challenge is to have the characters come to life and interact in a plausible and emotionally affecting way. The Straka Caldera storyline was also tricky because nothing could be explicit. You have the novel, the source novel that's functioning in this way, which may or may not have some communications to the editor-translator within it. You've got the footnotes by the editor and translator, which may or may not be communicating in some way with the writer of the source text. So, it's how do you build a relationship out of where everything is implied, and not just, but implied at a really oblique angle. So that was tricky too.
Because their relationship seems to mirror Eric and Jen's as the book goes along. It's fun to kind of track that, but it's harder to track.
Yeah, right.
Straka and Caldera's relationship. So before I open up, I want to close with one more question before we open it up to the audience. I know they have plenty, but my last one is a little philosophical. Do you think that a book like like Ship of Theseus, is the future of print one in which it offers a more interactive experience for the reader, one where the reader will invest so much of themselves in it?
I've read a couple of people suggesting that it is a model for print media to move forward with. I think if that happens, great. I mean, I think it's that's not going to work for every narrative. I mean, I'm a little suspicious of pronouncements that this is the future of something, that everything's going to go in this way. I think some projects will lend themselves to that kind of production or that kind of experience. But, there's also no substitute for a simple narrative with characters you invest in, and that can easily happen in ink on pages, just like it has for hundreds of years. But I think what I think would be great, though, is if people if writers get inspired by books like this and other books that are telling stories in unconventional ways and in unconventional forms, if writers pick that up and start working with it. If publishers maybe are more willing to take a flyer on an unconventional physical thing, that would be great. But I don't know. I mean, I think electronic books are going to keep being electronic books and being wonderful, and I think print books will keep being print books and being. But there will be some projects. Yeah, sure. I mean, that will maybe remind people that physical books are very, very cool things. But as far as a trend, as far as where publishing is going to go, I'm not qualified to say at all. Was that a good enough evasion?
I have no idea where publishing is going to go, and I get asked that question as well by Steve, asks me that question every couple of weeks. So let's open it up to the audience. I'm sure I didn't even come close to asking all the questions you have. So yes, back there.
I have a question and a comment. You described the complicated process of producing. And I wonder, you just consider a lot of writers go through pretty complicated processes to create proposals. We had the example of James Joyce. Readers aren't used to that. So I'm kind of, does it tickle your fancy somewhat that you're putting a willing reader into the position, kind of climbing the same mountain you climb, that they have to do is, readers aren't used to that. They are not used to this much. Did you chuckle about how readers now have to work as hard as you do?
Oh.
At least some come close to it.
Katie, could you briefly summarize the questions for the benefit of the video?
Yes. Tim is wondering if your intent is to make the reader, I hope I have this right, Tim, work as hard as you worked to write this book. Do I have that right, Tim?
That's it, yeah.
Okay.
That actually sounds like a little mean-spirited, actually, or passive-aggressive or something, like. No, I mean, I think I knew that, it'll be a different kind of experience for readers. I mean, and I think I thought this will be fun. And yeah, people people might have to work hard to engage with the text. But I mean, at the same time, even thinking that, I'm well aware of the risk, which is that many people are going to choose not to engage with that. So, you know, I would say, like, I found it interesting. It was exciting to me to be involved in making something that was going to maybe be rewarding in different or additional ways. But I don't know that I was hoping that I really needed a reader's sweat to match my sweat.
I just want to make one comment. Do you have to turn in your librarian's card because you're encouraging?
I have no problem with that. They're going to a good home. Yeah.
I want to know, maybe I missed this, you talked about the best approach to read the book. When you wrote it, did you write the source novel first, or did you keep going back and forth and think, oh, I still put this in here, get out of the way, and then go back and start a second book with the...
So the question is, what was the order in which things got written? Did the source novel and the, yeah, how did I approach writing it? I wrote for the sample that we took out to publishers. I wrote the foreword in chapter 1 of Ship of Theseus, and then did the margin notes. We got those together and showed them. But once we sold the book, I figured that the best thing to do would be to write Ship of Theseus all the way to the end, and then go back and layer in the margin story. I think everyone was in agreement on that, because it was really important that Ship of Theseus stand on its own as a novel, and not, I mean, because of the Straka, you know, the backstory of Straka, which is to say, like, he was a writer who sold a great many books and people take him seriously. So, you know, after we sold the book, someone said, well, you realize you've just committed to writing a novel that is, to some degree, a classic of 20th century Western literature. I said, no problem. Yeah, I didn't really think that through. But, so no, but I wrote Ship of Theseus the rest of the way through. We did a couple drafts on that. I would finish a chapter and send it to Lindsay. Lindsay would give me some notes on it, we'd talk about it, and then when we had a multi-chapter arc in place that we felt like was working well, we'd hand it off to JJ for his notes. And then we did the same thing again when we were getting the margin story together. And then we did a couple holistic revisions once everything was together.
Oh, yeah.
Can you...
Yeah, it's... oh, I'm sorry.
The question is, what's the length of time that Jen and Eric are passing the book back and forth between each other?
Because right, they are physically passing this book back and forth, and in fact, leaving it for each other, because they don't meet for quite some time. So, I mean, there are logistical challenges there, but it's sort of subtly marked that their interaction begins right at the end of spring break, and the main portion of their narrative concludes around the time of graduation. So it's about a 3-month period, which is, you know, that's so what you have to do, and there are notes in the book that allude to this. It's not like they're simply writing one note and passing it along and then getting one response to that. They'd be at it for like 8 years if they were doing that. But no, so we conceived of it as they're reading through, and they might respond to, you know, 4 things in chapter 2 and 1 in chapter 6 and 3 more in chapter 9 with each pass. And there are a couple references in the notes where they, you know, specifically address that, and you know, one hopes it's enough to allow the reader to, again, invest in the illusion that this is how they're doing it.
Yeah, you had a question.
The decoder wheel that you did me? So I cheated and went to the SFiles 22 website. And there, I noticed there are things in there, like there's a list of all of the words that have circles around them, and all of the words that have squares around them. And I'm assuming, I'm not completely sure, that you are not affiliated with the SFiles 22 website.
No, that's completely organic. That's some readers have really gotten into it.
So did they find things in the book that you didn't put there?
Well, you realize I cannot comment on that. No, I mean, there are things in the book that are there to be found for people who want to look deeply, and I think this is true also of any book. You know, it's true in the student manuscripts that I have in workshop every week, which is that readers are always going to find some things that that were possibly accidental, or things that were semi-intentional, things that, I mean, there's a lot going on subconsciously when somebody's writing. And so it might just be that there are associations. So, you know, maybe it wasn't 100% purposeful, but it makes sense because of all of the other things going on, because of thematic concerns. Or I guess what I'm saying is it's a mix of all of it, which is there have been some discoveries that were there to be discovered, and some things that people have pointed out where I've looked at it and I said, hey, yeah, that was a cool connection. I did that.
That's a great website.
Oh yeah, they've really gotten deeply into it, and it's really gratifying to see, because, you know, every writer wants people to read their stuff, but it's a special kind of awesome, I think, to have people digging in that deeply. You know, that doesn't always happen.
On that website is a list of where to put the ephemera if it falls out of your book.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's getting used for more than anything else.
SFiles 22.
Right. Yes, back there. You've.
As you're shopping the book to publishers, and then conversely, the
You know, I'm not sure. I wasn't. I mean, I was there for. We went to New York and did a bunch of in-person meetings. So I don't know that there were actually rejection letters or. And I was already kind of burying myself in my little writer cave. So it was JJ who was dealing more with those sort of big questions of who are we going to go with, who's interested. But my favorite story about the shopping the manuscript process is that it was, as you know, JJ is fanatical about secrecy. You know, there has to, you know, secrecy necessarily attaches to a JJ project. And I found this out later, which is that every copy of the pitch document that had gone out to, you know, any number of people at the publishers was coded with a typo, like one particular typo somewhere, such that if a copy leaked, they could track down whose it was.
Oh, wow.
That is brilliant. It's positively Straka-esque. And I mean, there's also like I'm told that when I think they were shopping the UK rights, and all the UK publishers simultaneously got messengered a copy of it, like I think at their homes on a certain morning. I don't know if that's true, but I think of it as this great sort of cloak and dagger drama, the receiving of the pitch document.
Back there, Carol.
Projects, however, and speaking of media.
So the question is there a movie of S in the works? And I don't have to worry about secrecy. I mean, I can say the answer is no. From the beginning, I think he felt strongly like we are making a thing that is a book. And this is, and I agree completely, this is the form in which the narrative exists at its best. So why make something in a form that will be second best, or not as good, or not good at all. I have no idea how it would be a film or a TV show. I'm sure some smart person could figure out a way to do it, but it's not in the works.
Before we're going to move over to the book signing now, and so any questions you have, feel free to ask Doug at the table. But I am going to ask one final question. You know this one is coming. What can you tell us about the new J.J. Abrams Star Wars movie?
Only that I did not get the part that I wanted.
Oh. Well, thank you, Doug, and he'll be signing out there in the hallway.
Thank you all.